Have you ever wondered, what if Captain America never really disappeared? An old man who spent his entire life fighting wars suddenly returns, young again, ready for one final battle. I'm talking about Steve Rogers, and after Marvel's latest Avengers Doomsday footage, fans have been asking one huge question. How is Steve back? At first, everyone assumed he had to be a multiverse variant. After all, in the MCU, almost anything is possible now. But what if that's completely wrong? What if this is actually the original Steve Rogers?
The trailer gives us some pretty strong clues. The suit, the shield, even the way he wields Mjolnir, everything points to one conclusion. This isn't a random version of Captain America. This is the same Steve Rogers who defeated Red Skull, led the Avengers during the Battle of New York, stood alone against Thanos, and finally returned every Infinity Stone to its proper place at the end of Avengers Endgame. After that mission, Steve chose to stay in the past, grow old with Peggy Carter, and live the life he never got the chance to have. So here's the real mystery. If Steve grew old, how is he suddenly young again in Avengers Doomsday?
To answer that question, we have to go back to the MCU's time travel rules. Because Endgame made one thing very clear. Changing the past doesn't rewrite your future. Instead, it creates an entirely new timeline, a completely separate universe. Marvel has repeated this rule over and over again in later movies and shows. Every major change in the past creates a new branch in the multiverse. And once you understand that, Steve Rogers' story starts to make a lot more sense. His return might not break the MCU's rules at all. It might actually be exactly how those rules were always supposed to work.
Think back to Endgame. The Avengers traveled across different points in time to collect the Infinity Stones. Every time they removed the stone, they risked creating a new branch in the timeline. That's why Steve's final mission was so important. He had to return every single stone to the exact moment it was taken. Once he did that, those branching timelines would be erased. Mission accomplished. But then, Steve made one decision that changed everything. Instead of coming home, he stayed in the past with Peggy Carter, and in that exact moment, a brand new timeline was born.
That wasn't just a short visit. Steve didn't stay for a few days, or even a few years. He lived an entire lifetime with Peggy. He finally got the peaceful life he always dreamed about. And according to the MCU's own rules, that life couldn't happen in the original timeline. It had to happen in a completely different universe. That's why the old Steve we see sitting on the bench at the end of Endgame is so interesting. Marvel skipped over nearly 70 years of his life. And that missing chapter could be exactly what Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars are finally about.
Now here's where one of the biggest fan theories comes in. What if the timeline Steve created eventually became Earth 828, the universe of the Fantastic Four? It sounds wild at first, but there are a few interesting clues. That world feels strangely futuristic, yet it's also stuck in a retro era. The technology is incredibly advanced, but the overall style looks like it came from decades ago. And honestly, that mix feels surprisingly similar to Steve Rogers himself, a man from the past living in a future that evolved around him.
There's another detail that fans can't stop talking about. In Fantastic Four: First Steps, there's a brief scene showing a father and his son watching TV together. It's a tiny moment, easy to miss, but some fans believe that isn't just a random family. What if that's actually Steve Rogers and his son? Marvel never confirms it, but if Steve really spent his entire life in that universe, it would make perfect sense for him to have a family. And suddenly, that small scene could become one of the biggest clues in the entire multiverse saga.
But here's where things get really interesting. Where does Dr. Doom fit into all of this? There are two major possibilities. The first, Doom is actually from this new Earth 828. If Steve's decision created an entirely new universe, it could have changed history in ways we haven't seen yet. Some fans even believe this universe's version of Tony Stark eventually became Dr. Doom. That would explain why they share the same face. It's only a theory for now, but if it's true, Steve's choice may have indirectly created his greatest enemy yet.
The second possibility is even bigger. What if Doctor Doom isn't from Earth 828 at all? What if he's from another universe, one that's being destroyed because Earth 828 now exists? That would explain an incursion. In Marvel Comics, an incursion happens when two universes begin colliding with each other. Eventually, one of them has to die. If Steve's decision created a brand new universe, it may have started a chain reaction across the entire multiverse. And if that's true, Steve Rogers may have unknowingly become the reason this whole crisis began.
Think about how everything connects. Steve goes back in time, keeps his promise to Peggy, and chooses to stay. That one personal decision creates a brand new timeline. Years later, that timeline could become the center of an incursion. Now, entire universes are at risk. If Doctor Doom discovers that Steve's choice started this chain of events, then Steve wouldn't just be another Avenger. He'd become one of Doom's highest priority targets. Not because Steve wanted any of this, but because his decision may have changed the fate of the entire multiverse.
Now here's another question fans keep asking. If Steve spent decades in the past, how did he get back to the main MCU timeline? Remember, Pym particles were extremely limited, so how could he travel across timelines again? This is where Reed Richards enters the picture. Think about it. If the greatest hero in history is living in your universe, the smartest man alive is eventually going to find out. Reed isn't just a genius scientist, he's one of the few people capable of understanding and navigating the multiverse itself.
So here's my theory. At some point, Steve and Reed Richards finally meet. Reed learns the truth about Steve's timeline and realizes how important he is to what's coming. When the events of Avengers Doomsday begin, Reed could be the one who brings Steve back to Earth 616, not with Pym particles, but with his own multiversal technology. Then, after the battle's over, Reed may send Steve back to finish the life he chose with Peggy. If that happens, it would explain Steve's return without breaking a single MCU time travel
And
rule.
here's the best part. This theory could even explain one of Endgame's biggest mysteries. Remember the ending? Steve never returned through Hulk's time machine. Instead, he simply appeared on that bench, already old. Marvel never explained how he got there. But if Reed Richards brought him back using advanced multiversal technology, everything suddenly fits. Steve didn't need the quantum tunnel at all. He had another way home. And that missing piece could finally be revealed in Avengers Doomsday. And there's another connection that makes this theory even more interesting. In Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Reed Richards already had technology that looked incredibly advanced. Some fans even compared it to the TVAs. Now, think about Kang the Conqueror. He's a descendant of Reed Richards, and in the larger Marvel lore, Kang is deeply connected to multiversal technology and the TVA. So what if Reed's inventions are actually the first step toward the technology that eventually becomes the TVA? If that's true, the entire multiverse saga is far more connected than most people realize.
When you connect all these pieces, Steve's story starts to look very different. He wasn't just a retired Avenger. He may have become one of the most important people in the entire multiverse. A single choice, to stay with Peggy, could have created a new universe. That universe may have triggered an incursion, and that incursion may have drawn the attention of Doctor Doom himself. If that's true, then Steve isn't returning to save just one world. He could be returning to save every universe.
Of course, it's important to remember one thing. Right now, this is still a fan theory. Marvel hasn't officially confirmed any of it, but that's exactly what makes it so exciting. The clues are there, the timeline rules fit, and the connections between Steve, Reed Richards, Doctor Doom, and the multiverse all line up surprisingly well. If even part of this theory turns out to be true, Avengers Doomsday could completely change the way we look at Endgame forever.
Now imagine this for a second. Doctor Doom finally learns the truth. He discovers that one decision made by Steve Rogers decades ago set this entire chain of events in motion. From Doom's perspective, Steve isn't just Captain America. He's the man whose choice may have reshaped the multiverse. That instantly makes Steve one of the most valuable and most dangerous people alive. Which means their confrontation wouldn't just be a fight between a hero and a villain. It would be a battle over the future of every universe.
But there's one more twist. Rumors suggest that Doctor Doom isn't just preparing for war, he's collecting power. Across the multiverse, he's searching for beings with abilities beyond imagination. One name keeps coming up: Franklin Richards, Reed Richards' son. In Marvel Comics, Franklin has the power to create entire universes. If Doom can control someone like Franklin, he wouldn't just survive an incursion, he could reshape reality itself. And that's exactly why every major hero, including Steve Rogers, may be pulled into this conflict.
Everything starts coming together. Steve's choice, the birth of a new timeline, the threat of an incursion, Dr. Doom's mission, and Franklin Richards' incredible power. They're not separate stories. They could all be pieces of the same puzzle. If Marvel is really building toward this, then Avengers Doomsday won't just be another superhero movie. It could reveal that the biggest event in the multiverse saga was secretly set in motion the moment Steve Rogers chose love over duty. And that single decision may have changed everything.
If all of this turns out to be true, then Endgame wasn't really the end of Steve Rogers' story. It was just the beginning of a chapter Marvel intentionally kept hidden. Those missing decades with Peggy, the life he built, the people he met, and the choices he made could end up being the key to everything that's happening now. Because sometimes the biggest moments in the MCU aren't the battles we see on screen. They're the decisions made in silence. And Steve Rogers may have made the most important decision in Marvel history.
So here's my final prediction. Avengers Doomsday won't just answer how Steve Rogers returned. It could reveal what he was doing all those years, why he suddenly had to come back, and how his hidden life connects to Doctor Doom's plan. Then, Secret Wars could take that story even further, bringing every timeline, every universe, and every major hero into one final conflict. If that happens, Steve Rogers won't just return as Captain America. He'll return as one of the most important characters in the entire multiverse saga. Until Marvel officially reveals the full story, this remains just a theory. But it's a theory built on the MCU's own rules, not random speculation. Every clue, every timeline, and every connection seems to point in the same direction. Maybe Steve Rogers didn't accidentally create the multiverse crisis. Maybe he simply made the one choice that exposed a problem that was always waiting to happen. And if that's true, his return in Avengers Doomsday could be far more important than anyone expects.
Whether this theory ends up being right or wrong, one thing is clear. Steve Rogers' story isn't over yet. Marvel has left too many unanswered questions, and Avengers Doomsday feels like the perfect place to finally answer them. How did Steve spend those missing decades? What really happened in his alternate timeline? And why is he needed now after all these years? If Marvel delivers on those answers, this could become one of the most emotional and game-changing stories the MCU has ever told.
So that's my theory. What if Steve Rogers' decision at the end of Endgame didn't just change his own life, but changed the fate of the entire multiverse? We'll have to wait for Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars to find out. But if Marvel pulls this off, it could completely redefine everything we thought we knew about Captain America. Now, I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think this theory makes sense, or do you have a different explanation? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.